Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week, alongside guest Ross Halbin, we discuss the fifth episode from Ahsoka titled Shadow Warrior. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Plus, Force Ghost Conversations is live on Patreon. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And boy, is this the one you've been waiting for. I mean, what a doozy of an episode, of course. Yes, spoiler alert, the return of Hayden Christensen, The World Between Worlds, Young Ahsoka, Clone Wars, Purgle, all of that in one jam-packed episode full of a lot of soul-searching and self-discovery and, frankly, self-rediscovery, too, which we'll talk about a lot in this episode with special guest Ross Halbin. Of course, you know him from the show that we did Return of the Jedi, our 40th anniversary episode on that one. He's a writer for Fantha Tracks and the host of the Album Cockpit podcast. So on the other side of this very short break here, we'll be back to discuss all things Ahsoka Episode 5, Shadow Warrior. But before we get into that, let's do some Cloud City gossip for this week. And there isn't a whole lot as we're getting into the kind of holiday season slowdown, if you will. But this week, the Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 finally released on physical media. So you can get 4K steelbooks of the entire first and second season at really any retailer that I can think of right now at this point. Mostly Amazon, Best Buy, probably Target you can probably get it at. But all those places probably will have the physical copies of these. And, you know, in this modern day and age where you never know what is and what isn't going to be on a streaming service anymore, this is an important thing to continue to expand your collections first and foremost if you're a collector of that stuff like I am, but to ensure that you can watch it at any time, even if the internet goes down, you will still have access to The Mandalorian and the great stories that are held within. So if you are a fan of that stuff, go check it out and see if you want to take The Mandalorian home with you. That's a fun little gift and perhaps a great gift for the holiday season that is fastly approaching for a lot of us here. Also, in terms of news adjacent to the Star Wars Lucasfilm galaxy, Rebel Moon, yes, the highly anticipated movie that we are going to be doing full discussions of over the next couple of weeks, is coming out a little bit earlier now. It's supposed to technically come out on Friday, December 22nd, but it is now premiering for all of us fans that are waiting to watch it the second it goes live at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on December 21st. So yes, that Thursday, they're basically doing like if you were to go see a movie at the cinema, and you would see it that Thursday night for some previews. So you get a little late night Rebel Moon if you're a fan of that, and looking forward to that like we are here on that Thursday then. So be sure to go to your Netflix accounts and search for Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, and then watch it that weekend because we'll be having great conversations. I know I've got our buddy Craig Dickinson from Reading Between the Reels lined up to chat about some Rebel Moon talk when we get to that time then. So be on the lookout for that, or at least the movie itself, first and foremost, next Thursday. And with that, folks, that is all the news that I had for this week. We'll be back on the other side of this short break with our Ahsoka Episode 5 conversation. All right, everybody, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And I think this is the episode that you've been waiting for. When we started our Ahsoka discussions a few weeks ago, I think you were all setting your calendars for this Episode 5 discussion. And of course, I could bring in no greater fan of Ahsoka, of Sabine especially. I see the sweatshirt he's got on right now. I'm so thrilled to welcome back to the show writer for Fantatrax and host of the Album Cockpit podcast, Ross Halbin. Ross, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, Anthony. Thanks for having me, and thanks for putting up with my congestion from a cold that has been battering me around a little bit.
Hey, a cold doesn't get in the way of Ahsoka discussions, am I right?
Never.
Well, Ross, this is interesting that we're having this discussion months after this episode has come out now. And this is really the thing that I've been asking some of the folks that have been coming on the show to talk about the series, that we get to, have the conversation of what was your experience like when you watched the series first, and now you get to revisit it in a way, and you get to maybe contemplate how your opinions have changed over the course of the last couple of weeks here. So to start, now that the series out is out in its entirety, what were your original thoughts about Ahsoka the series overall, and has that opinion changed at all now that some time has passed?
I expected to love it, and I probably enjoyed it more than I expected. So
Hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing that I can say, knowing that Dave Filoni, this is everything to him. And as a fan, I'm very much a half glass half full person.
Mm-hmm.
I expect to enjoy aspects of everything. That doesn't mean everything's perfect by any stretch, but as a fan, I give the room like, you know what? I can look past this because I got X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling's fun. New characters brought in were incredible. The visuals and the places that they were able to take this, especially in this episode, I felt like a little kid through so much
Yeah.
of it. And to me, that's what Star Wars should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that front. The thing though, from my experience, I'm glad that it exceeded your expectations as you watched it. I think so. When each episode came out, I would watch it once, and then I think after that first viewing each time, I would just kind of sit there, staring off into the void, and being like, "What did I just watch?" And then I had to spend a few days processing it, and then I'd watch it again maybe 3 or 4 days later, and I'd be like, "Oh, that was brilliant." It like would sink in so much differently, and then watching it a third or even a fourth time now for these episodes, now that we're doing it on the podcast here, it just is, you know, the the farm has been set, the seeds have been laid, the water has been irrigating the system, and these wonderful flowers are sprouting all over the Forest Ghost Conversations garden here. Like, this show just continues to deliver in many ways with each passing viewing for me. So it's really fun to hear each person's different experience with this. And speaking of experiences, Ross, we were talking baseball before we hopped on here. You hit a grand slam when it came to this episode. So you had the pleasure of actually seeing episode 5, Shadow Warrior, in a movie theater as part of the fan event that accompanied this. How did that experience go? Because I saw some conversation online that you had quite a wild journey when it came to this experience.
Yeah, and it's a live and learn kind of thing. So I guess with a lot of these events that get put on at theaters for special showings, this group or these groups that are typically in charge of them, they just flood the market with tickets because their job is to fill up the theater. It
Really?
doesn't matter how many, they'll just put them out there. And they just want a full house. That's their only job at the end of the day. So some random thing that none of us may pay attention to, they took the same approach with Ahsoka. So
Mm.
knowing that everyone who has a ticket for this thing showing up expecting to go, um, I don't know that I love the business practice. It makes sense for how they try to fill the theater for other instances.
Hmm.
I have a hard time with Lucasfilm working with groups like this for an event like this. So it turned into a 7-hour drive for me total. So
Oh,
going from
wow.
Indy to Chicago, Chicago back to Indy after watching 1 hour of television on the big screen,
Wow.
which I would do again and again because once I got in there, it was unbelievable. I was literally the last person brought into the theater. And it's thanks to Brooke McDonald, who follow her on Instagram if you want to know anything Disney, heavily involved in Star Wars. Seeing her experience with the group kind of closing out the Halcyon
Hmm.
Galactic Star Cruiser was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um, but just a great person who put her kid on her lap so that I could get in and have the last seat. I'll always be appreciative of that.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Like I got many questions about this experience, Ross. First off, did you go to work the next day after that long you basically had a whole you probably had to take off to even go to this thing to begin with, or you at least left early, right? To the 7 hours to 3 hours. Did you force yourself to leave at like 4 to then get there by like a 7 o'clock showing in three
I
hours?
I think I left at 4:15 with an original plan to leave around 2, but then something came up and I was just like,
No.
"Okay, I'll help with this." But I was like, "I have to drive to Chicago and I'm gonna hit rush hour
Oh, you
when I
tried.
get there." Um, so when I got there and I initially didn't get in and I was turned away, like I let my boss know. He
Oh,
was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I never imagined that would happen by
yeah.
you staying extra to do this." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah,
That's
yep,
how it goes.
yeah. That's life. That's sometimes that's what you have to deal with." Um, but I was sitting there and I was probably fuming for about 2 minutes.
To only 2 minutes. That's pretty good.
I'm pretty good about keeping an even keel, but I was pretty upset when they're like, "Oh no, all the seats are gone, all the posters are gone, everything's gone." I was just like, "Oh, I see." So,
Oh
um,
no.
but I didn't leave. So a lot of people
Yeah,
left,
that's a good thing. Yeah, yeah. You didn't leave, so you
and
kept it. You kept it. You stayed in place.
I was one of 5 people that stayed there, and I was just like, "Well, until this thing starts." I've worked in pro sports long enough, been around big events
Yep.
before. There's always a chance until it gets going.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I stayed there. I will completely nerd out. The Force was with me at this point. They found a way to get the 5 of us in there. And I was the last one out by myself out in the hallway, just like,
Wow.
oh, this drive home's gonna suck. Um, but then she came out and she's like, third row up, right on the edge, there's a spot. So I went in, got to talk to Brooke. She was fantastic. Her son was just her son and his reaction enhanced all of it for me as well. How excited
Mhm.
he was afterwards. Um, that's who the audience should be. And I love being a part of that audience,
Mhm.
but it's to excite these kids and to keep them knowing these storylines, knowing what heroes are all about, knowing what doing the right thing is all about. Um, so that was super cool. And then just hearing it, you know, it looks great on all of our screens, no matter what size you have.
Mhm.
But to hear it with that sound system, to
Oh
have the
yeah.
theater and the chairs shaking when certain things are happening, it really talk about an immersive experience and everything that can be incredible about a Star Wars experience. It was that. Seeing, I know we'll get into certain elements, but seeing Purgle up close on
Yeah.
that big of a screen, like it doesn't get better than that. That's like goosebumps as it's happening. Hearing the lightsabers, hearing the crashing of the waves, so many different senses just all being bombarded by what Filoni put together for this episode.
Mhm.
It was a magical moment. It's what Disney is. It's what Star Wars is. And if they could bottle that and continue to do it, that's why people are going to keep coming back for it.
Yeah. 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 Well, first off, I'm so glad that you actually were able to get in and, to have this wonderful experience. Ross, one of these days we'll get you just a very even keel. You just walk into the theater experience with no issues or problems like that. Because our listeners may recall when you were on to talk Indiana Jones that you had the, the worst sunburn of your life. And then,
That was
this
tough.
too. Every time we have you on the show here, you're having these like once in a lifetime experiences that you never forget.
Yeah, I tend
So
to have stories.
yeah, exactly. So like we'll get you this like a very easy episode one of these days where you're just like, yeah, I watched it on TV and it was really nice. um, but yeah, it's just I love hearing the passion of being in a theater and surrounding and engaging with what's going on screen here. And it's already great that you're noting things that like you don't get to necessarily think about when you're at home, right? The sound system, how that plays into it, being in a dark room with no distractions around you where you're only focusing on what's in front of you, being able to hear the waves crash, the lightsabers crack, and all that great stuff that are the hidden details that really make this series. I'm going to say overall, not just this episode,
Right.
but just something that is really special as it goes on too. So, shout out to Brooke for
Yeah, forever,
thinking on the
forever.
spot there.
Thank you, forever. Thank
Yeah,
you, Brooke.
it's amazing. Did they not charge tickets for it? Were they all
Oh,
free?
they're all
Was it
free.
just like
You just
okay,
had to
well,
sign up, and at some point they cut it off. But the practice to get people in, and what they typically have to do for a lot of the shows that they do is just overbook it completely
yeah, because they don't, yeah,
to hope that you're
yeah.
getting bodies in there. And this is
It's
just
interesting, yeah.
a different topic, a different property altogether.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, they should have known that a Star Wars thing giving out free tickets would have, with one showing too, mind you,
Yeah,
would if they had a second showing, probably more people would have been able to get in. Like you probably would have just said, "All right, I'll wait till the next one then," and all of that. But just one showing, one theater, one, they had maybe what 10 cities across the U.S. that were doing this kind
yeah.
of
I
thing,
think that's. I
and
think it's 10.
they gotta have some. I know this is probably their first time with Star Wars doing something like this, like you mentioned, but they have to have some algorithm in place. Like I used to work at a as with an events at a place, and we offered free tickets for certain events, and we knew based off of the venue how much to oversell it, so that we would recognize that we'd have about 30, 40, 25% attrition rates depending on
Right.
how big the venue is, right? So like, is this their first rodeo doing this? No, it's not. So like, and again, it does bring the question of maybe they shouldn't work with this group again in the future if they do something like that.
Yeah, I'll let them figure. I said my piece. I'm thankful that the person at the theater got me in. I'm thankful that Brooke made the seat available. I was very fortunate because it's a great community. Um,
Yeah,
but there were a lot of people that were turned away that I felt bad for as well. Or just like, oh, you know what, they could have done this better. But
yeah,
hopefully, it's a
yeah.
lesson learned.
Lesson learned indeed, and let's use this for future events fan events that they may be doing in the future. So let's cut to the chase of the episode now. We're good. All in on the spoilers, all in on the fun stuff. How cool is it to see Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker back on our television screens, or in your case, on a movie screen?
Well, and I think that's part of the experience in a theater again, in the community of a theater, where there were the visceral reactions and there were the
Hmm.
oohs and ahs and oh my god that
Oh yeah.
you got to hear throughout. So as you're seeing Anakin, as you're seeing, just the wonderful visual play of him going from Anakin to evil Anakin to Vader,
Hmm.
sometimes just in the flash of lightning, was just it was awe-inspiring, and you could feel that in the theater. You felt people tense up. You felt people saying, "Oh my god, is this really happening right now?" Like, "Oh, look at his eyes now. Oh, the saber's red." Anakin encompassing all that was Anakin and that Ahsoka needed to see was brilliant. Like, and to do that
Hmm.
in the world between worlds, or at least what I imagine is some faction of it. It didn't have all the same holes the same way. Maybe it's an offshoot of one. But even how Anakin, through their battle, he even knew how to manipulate the world between worlds to get to happen what he
Mm.
needed to happen. Taking the
Mm.
slash at the bridge that they're on so that Ahsoka falls. It's just like, oh, of course Anakin knows how to do that. So just
Mm.
magical, and a character, and getting Hayden Christensen up there again for a larger role. It's I don't care if it's fan service. I don't see it that way, but if it is, so be it. I loved it.
I say, how could it be fan service if it's serving the character called Ahsoka that the series is named
right?
after? I mean, how could it be? Everything's fan service at that point.
Yeah.
Then
Well, and you do get a
I
lot of
love,
that.
yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said there about Anakin being able to manipulate the world between worlds, right? If this even is the world between worlds, I know that's a debate that I've personally been having too. I'm like, is this really the world between worlds? It doesn't look like it. That what we were introduced in Rebels and all that stuff. But then I think we were introduced to it about 2 or 3 times before we actually saw the real thing in Rebels too. So it's like, okay, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I've been going back and forth on that, but
Yeah, I don't know.
Anakin is the chosen one. So why wouldn't he be able to go beyond the bounds of what we think and what we know to be true and all that? And also, it is literally a wacky concept to begin with, the world between worlds, the space outside of time itself. That, why are we putting rules and boundaries and regulations onto something like this ultimately at the end? So I like that. That actually really is awesome that you brought that up. That's something that I'll certainly be considering beyond this episode and further, that what if that is really the capabilities of the chosen one, is going beyond that, like he can manipulate time and space itself through the world between worlds to enact good and change and be the save his friends from dying, as he ultimately does in this episode here. I am one of I'll toot my own horn here. I think I'm the biggest Hayden Christensen fan out there. This is the character that got me into Star Wars. His portrayal of Anakin Skywalker, I will say. I was a fan of it beforehand, but Attack of the Clones was really where my fandom took off. I watched that movie 300 times in the summer of '03, and going to see Revenge of the Sith was an event experience for me the first time. I was 10 when it came out, and just the build up to it. I think it was the first time in my life that I'd ever been so excited for something, that I had that date circled for months in
Yeah,
advance. Like, it was 2004, and I knew that in May this is when it was coming out, and I knew, all right, this is when the teaser is coming out. This is the movie I can go see to see the trailer with it and all that stuff. How do I talk my mom into going to see this? It might be a rated R movie. I don't know. Just plotting through it. I think I even found a bootleg Revenge of the Sith script that leaked online and read through it, so I kind of knew everything that was going to
oh
happen in
wow.
the movie a year before. It was just a great time and a magical time and that cultivated my fandom that led us to this conversation here today. So the fact that we just get more of them, I know we already got Obi-Wan Kenobi last year, which another amazing show, and we're just in this Hayden renaissance. More Hayden Christensen, in my opinion, more Anakin Skywalker. If we can find the ways to get them in, showcase them. He's a Force ghost. I've always believed that in making the controversial Return of the Jedi change and making Anakin Skywalker the Hayden Christensen version, and George has his reasons for why he did that and all that stuff. But I always said, like, well, great, that means the character can live for another 40 plus years, right? Even if you think through the math of it all, Vader's really like 46 when he dies. So like if it's Hayden Christensen the character, I mean, he's in his early 40s now, like he still looks very similar to how he did back in his early
Yeah,
20s.
yeah.
All they have to do is just put a little bit of makeup on him and he's basically there. So like, it makes sense in my head that it's not, it's also how he would look if he were 40s, in his 40s too. Maybe not just with the long hair and all of that, but it's just what a magical time to be a Star Wars fan and all this stuff. And you know, we're here to talk a bit about the themes of this all too, right? Because it is just fan service if he just appears and then just says, "Well, see ya." That's not what happens in this episode at all. So, Ross, what do you think is the ultimate lesson that Anakin is trying to teach Ahsoka here?
I think what he portrays here and what he often shows um, through a lot of the ways that we've been able to see him again is that you have to live for the moment and be ready to adapt.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
you never know what situation you're going to be dropped in. You never know, what good things, what bad things, what's going to happen. There's rarely a perfect scenario, and heroes and leaders are needed, and they need to be the ones that can adapt the most. So I think that's the primary thing he's trying to share. And I think it's fun that he doesn't fully grasp how impactful his path was to Ahsoka, and how
Mm-hmm.
Balin was
Mm-hmm.
able to play on that and say, your whole legacy is war. So he's able to needle at her. Anakin's so far above that that he doesn't think twice about it. But it's the reality to someone else. So I think it's recognizing what others are experiencing, but
Mm.
being able to put your best foot forward in any of those scenarios.
Yeah, yeah. I like what you're saying there. Like, we already talked that this character has the, if we go with that line of thought that you shared earlier, right? If he's able to even manipulate the world between worlds and to bend it to his will, why does he even think twice about if his legacy is of death and destruction, right? He's leagues beyond that at this point. um, and that's just, and it is right. He is a little he's empathetic to her in this moment, and in my opinion, right? He's saying like, well, what do you want me to do, right? You are so much more than just that, because I'm more than that, and you are a part of this legacy whether you like it or not. There are two things that I think that he does as well in this moment too, that is so clearly Ahsoka is troubled by the past, that she is a part of that legacy, right? She is troubled by the fact that she um, feels like she has this darkness inside of her because Anakin had that darkness inside of him. And, that's something that she needs to process and reconcile with, right? That she can be that and more. And it's okay to have all that in her. It doesn't need to define her the way that it defined Anakin in some regards. So that's something that they work through, I think, a lot in this episode by her defeating him and overcoming that and facing dark side Anakin, facing light side Anakin, right? Visually overtaking him and defeating him, in my opinion, showcases the work and the processing of that matter. But then the second thing is literally like the question of, live or die, right? I think up to this point in the series, Ahsoka has been so stagnant. She's, yes, she is trying to find Ezra. She's got some type of goal in mind, but she's not really doing anything, really, in my opinion, right? She's not with Luke. She's not trying to start a new Jedi Order. She's not training Grogu. She's saying no to, she's not training Sabine. She's saying no to a lot of things, and she's kind of wandering about with no real direction or motive or belief in anything. Which he's like, what are you living for then? What are you doing? You live or die. You can die right now if you want, but you don't have to. And if if you're gonna live for something, right? Choose one way or the other. Make a
Yeah,
choice.
what's your purpose at this
And
point?
exact 100%. And they have to go back through time, right? To go through the Clone Wars. They see all this. They see all that. And eventually, it just gets to the point where it's like, all right, yeah, you lived through all that, but to be a Jedi is to fight, right? That doesn't matter if we were in war or we were in peacetime, quote unquote. Jedi were still going to war torn areas of the galaxy to stop, these bounty hunters from killing civilians, and they were going to stop these brutal engagements that were happening across the galaxy. And that was their history for thousands of years. They would go out and help people. And usually, people in distress are people in conflict or fighting and stuff like that. So the fact that she's like just minimizing it to, we're death and destruction. You trained me for war. You're like, yeah, we got to adapt to the times, but this is frankly what Jedi do. We help people, right? We are here as leaders. You know, decisions have costs, they have consequences. We learn from them and we move on, right? There's yeah, all that stuff comes into play here, and it's just so powerful to me overall, just seeing everything that comes into this moment. I mean, it's so overwhelming. That's why it takes like 4 or 5 viewings for you in order to get to a point where you can like, oh my gosh, this is actually what they're trying to say on screen here. um, which is, it's just so powerful. And you know, I've talked a little bit here about some of those first, and you've said some of them too. For live action Star Wars, so that we've said, there's potentially the world between worlds in this episode. That we saw some Clone Wars flashbacks. Anakin in the early Clone Wars look too is pretty cool if you ask me. The Siege of Mandalore, young Ahsoka comes into this fray. Rex, a little bit of Tamura Morrison there. What part was your favorite to see and why?
It was that initial Battle of Ryloth, knowing
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what's happening. What did he just do by slashing that bridge? Where did she fall? Seeing her come up as young Ahsoka is just in the theater. There was that gasp of
Yeah, really.
oh my god! And then seeing the clone troopers coming through the dust and dirt and realizing, oh, we're in a new place in a new time right now that we just got
Mm-hmm.
dropped into. And then Anakin's coming through like it's no big deal. And Ahsoka is there just like, wait, how are we here? Um, Seeing the Twi'leks that are there, kind of putting it in place that this is likely the Battle of Ryloth and one of those early Clone Wars battles is just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it caught me so off guard that it was perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Ahsoka is all of us in that sequence, right? She's like, "This is the Clone Wars," and yeah, yeah, no kidding.
How did we get here? What's going on?
How did we get here? I don't know. What
Right,
is
right.
this? How? This isn't what it was. We were just up there, and I was fighting Balin, and I thought I was dying, and you said I lost. All this happened. What? That's great. I love seeing that too, and yeah, to place it in that early Clone Wars timeline too, especially with Ahsoka's outfit too, being from those early seasons of all that. It's just so cool to see in general. And for me, I will say, just frankly, seeing that Anakin in that young or early Clone Wars look, right? Seeing the armor on the arms and the chest a bit, that was so cool because when I was watching those episodes when they came out, and even the last couple of years or so, to see like that Matt Lanter kind of inspired look, and I was like, how is this Hayden Christensen? What's that hairstyle? What would that hairstyle look like on him? And now to actually have that answered, it's gonna when I rewatch some of those Clone Wars episodes, it's gonna be a whole brand new experience, frankly, because I'll be able to like visualize what Hayden Christensen will look like in that. It's different when you have animated characters that just exist in that time period because I have nothing to compare it to. I'm just like, okay, that's Ahsoka then. Um, but to see actually Hayden Christensen, the character they were basing it off of, playing that same character from that time frame, I just found that to be so neat.
Well, and you also
um,
get that, I don't know that they were the most embraced characters with the Martez sisters and what they taught Ahsoka about, hey,
yeah.
here's what the Jedi are to us. We lost our family
Mm-hmm.
because of the Jedi, because they were reckless in how they were trying to pursue justice. So there's so many levels of Ahsoka, and we just keep getting them through the different mediums of trying to figure out this character who her mentor is the only one who has a more dense character path.
Yeah.
So as you're going
Got
through
that
this
right.
and thinking about, okay, thinking of the Martez sisters and how they made Ahsoka feel, going through Ryloth, going to Mandalore, and this whole journey, it's so big for this character development, and it allows so much for this just beloved character.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Agreed. And we always love a Martez sisters reference here. It's my wife's second favorite Clone Wars arc, aside from the Bad Batch, which then is, of course, her favorite Star Wars property at this point. Which again, Martez sisters make an
Yep.
appearance in that first season, so that's awesome and great connection there on that front. So after the interaction with Anakin, Ahsoka then comes out of the water. She is saved, and once she recovers and comes back to the light a bit, she dons a new white wardrobe. So, what do you think that this outfit change symbolizes?
I mean, we see the water swallowing her up, and that's a baptism. We see
Yeah.
the light shining on her when she's waking up on the Jedi cruiser. That's her enlightenment. That's her moment of nirvana. That's her Gandalf the Grey turning into Gandalf the White because of the trials and tribulations that
Hmm.
she had just gone through. And now she's ready. She's more prepared for this next challenge in front of her. And she has this lightened mood about everything of, yeah, I don't know that the Purgle will take us where we're going, but it's not here. So let's see where they take us kind of thing. So I think so much of it is enlightenment. and being ready for that next stage of the journey.
Hmm. So Ross, to play a little devil's advocate here, she did wear the white in that Rebels epilogue there, where she saw Sabine again. How does that play into this? Did she then switch back to gray and then turn back to white? What's the deal with the Ahsoka outfit changes over
Uh,
time?
I mean, is it cyclical? Is it she's been
Is
through a
it? Yeah.
ton. So does she keep running into these elements? And you know, no one just remembers to do things. It's go back to the episode with her watching Anakin teaching her how to fight with a lightsaber. Hey, I
Hmm.
never went back and practiced enough because I knew it. Go back, get those repetitions, re reground yourself all the time. And just based off your question, that's what I'll come up with in this quick of a scenario there.
Yeah.
But it really is like if you're going to be a great athlete, you're not just doing unbelievable plays at practice every day. You're doing the mundane.
Hmm.
You're running this same route 9 times, 10 times to get those reps. How do I do it better this time? How do I make sure that I'm doing it better for the next time? So I kind of tie it back together there of you have to constantly revisit it and Ahsoka has to constantly work at it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're definitely on the right track there when it comes to that. Like, I would, in yes anding what you even said there, right? I think like there's still that she just came out of that situation on Malachor, or she found her way off of that eventually, and then she thinks that she's in a good place, but then she's still like I think we talked about she has that Anakin pressure weighing on her that maybe she didn't address yet at that time, and then that eventually comes back on her and weighs on her, and then she reverts back to the gray, and then going through that she's now a whole person again, fully right. It kind of reminds me, like you did the athlete analogy there, and it reminds me of the drummer from Rush, Neil Peart, who his his wife and daughter died in a tragic accident. He basically took a couple of years off of drumming with Rush, and then went on a motorcycle bike ride across the world. And after those 3 or 4 years that he did that, he basically had to relearn how to play the drums again, and started from the bare essentials and the basics, and started doing his rudiments again, and basically relearned how to become the world's best drummer again.
Yeah, I mean, you have to
So
if you want to be a great writer, you write every day. If you want to be a great
that's right.
singer,
That's
you're practicing and you're taking care of your voice every day. It is not something and I think a lot of people sometimes can look and be like, "Oh, you're gifted." Just because you're gifted doesn't mean
hmm
it's handed to you. There's still a lot of work involved, and I think that's what we get to see through Ahsoka, through so many of her journeys. And we still have the next one still ahead of us with the Mortis arc.
right. Yeah.
She's been through it already. She's alive because of it. And now
hmm
if we get another series, if we get this factored into a film, anything like that, I hope we get more of that story and how she plays along with the Mortis arc.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Even Ahsoka says herself earlier in the season, talent is a factor. Yes, in terms of like to commune with the Force, but uh, focus and determination are ultimately what gets you there at the end of the day. Which she's eventually getting some of that lesson right back to her that she tried to teach Sabine early on with the cup and all that, and she's starting small and she's getting right back into it, letting the Force be free and saying, "Let's go with the Purgle to Peridian, seeing what happens here." So, you know, let's talk about that for a second here. Ahsoka's journey does conclude in this episode with her bonding with, going inside the mouth of, and then journeying to Peridia inside a Purgle. So oddly enough, this action isn't, frankly, in my opinion, the most bonkers thing in the episode when you factor in the Hayden Christensen and World Between Worlds
Right.
of it all. But what was your immediate reaction and thoughts when seeing this development for the first time?
It takes something special, and I think we've seen that all Jedi can't connect with animals the same way.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
that everyone's going to be able to do this. I think this is some of that enlightenment. Is just like, you know what? I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try because my purpose is to go get Ezra and now to go
Mm.
get Sabine.
Hmm.
So I have a reason I have to do these things. So I'm going to take these chances. And yep, this is completely different. And no one from the New Republic's going to believe what I'm doing. So I have to hurry. But this is the way that I can make it work. And it is that magical element. And it is that thing that makes Star Wars special of getting some magic factored into the lives of these individuals that we care about.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think Anakin would ever bond with a creature, and he's even the chosen one. Versus Ezra makes like his whole career as a Force user out of bonding with animals. So, like, to see Ahsoka just being like, "Let's give it a try," the laissez faire of it all, versus her being like, "Yes, we have to do
Yep.
this, we have to do that, we have to do this, we have to do that." She's just getting outside of her own, the walls that she's put up in her head of, this is how you do something, this is how you, in order to survive and be safe, this is how you do it, and this is the only right way. But now she's saying, like, let's expand our possibilities here. Like, I've got nothing to lose at this point, she's basically saying at this, right? We find them or we don't, right? We have no other way of contacting them. The orb that showed the map of directions is gone. Even if we did that, who knows how long it would take to build such a hyperspace drive system in order to get out there to follow the
Yep.
exact coordinates. This is the best chance we got, because we got to get there now. If not, then we'll end up somewhere and we'll do something there and we'll figure it out from there. But the fact that she's just willing, yeah, it is that enlightenment. That's a brilliant way of putting it. She is emerged with a newfound purpose. She's ready to not only just accept her past, to move forward with that information, to be a better teacher to Sabine, in my opinion, to connect with her in a different way that she will in the later episodes of
Right.
this season, to actually be that teacher and mentor that she should have been from the start, if you ask me. And that all showcases here with this starting moment here, coming out of the waters from Anakin, that rebirth, and then donning on some different garbs and saying, "Yeah, I'm going to do something outside the box here. Let's do this." And Hu Yang's like, "Well, all right, let's do it. It's out of protocol, but let's everything's out of protocol
Yep.
at this point." So it's just wonderful, and this is really where this episode, in my opinion, takes a real mythological. All of Star Wars is based in myth, but this one really, the influences are certainly there of like going back in time and experiencing your past, almost like we're in the holiday season, almost like a Christmas
Yeah.
carol in a
Yeah.
way, like facing yourself and your demons, and then journeying in the whale to go to places unknown. All that's there, and it went through the Star Wars filter and came out in episode 5 of Ahsoka here. So it's brilliant. And Ross, I thank you so much for journeying through your own cold to get to this point at the end of this conversation here. Do you have anything else that you want to add about Ahsoka episode 5, Shadow Warrior?
Yeah. I love the episode. I love the season. Obviously, thanks to Dan Z and Jen Soap Chok Chai for letting me join them on Coffee with Kenobi to break down all the episodes the day after each of them aired. So how we watched was very different in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I've got to record an episode the next night, and I've got an article due 2 days after. So uh, for Fantha Track, so I lived each of these so much, but it wasn't a chore at all. Like it was the most fun
Yeah.
thing. So getting this opportunity and being invited by you to join on Force Ghost Conversations once again to relive it is fantastic. So thank you, and again, apologies for my very nasally approach to this episode.
No worries at all. And actually, it's a gift for me too, because I have saved all the episodes that you did with Coffee with Kenobi when the show is coming out. Because out of principle, I just don't listen to it until I've done my episode recording on it, just so I don't want to get potentially anybody confused with not sharing or crediting opinions and thoughts correctly and all that stuff, or being influenced by other people's ideas, to keep the conversation as fresh as possible. Now I get to go back and listen to your thoughts months ago, almost going in my own time
Very fun.
journey
Very fun.
with the World Between Worlds. I'm cutting the floor here, and I'm going back to September to see how you thought back then, and maybe I can compare and contrast how your answers may have been a little bit different based off of how time
Yeah, I'd
has
love to hear
passed.
that.
So It would be great fun. So, Ross, where can the fine folks find you online?
Look for me on Album Cockpit Podcast on Spotify and Instagram. And you can also, for majority of my Star Wars stuff, find me on Instagram at PopstarIndie.
Wonderful. And of course, we are here at Forest Ghost Conversations. We'll be back next week with episode 6 of Ahsoka, which I believe is called Far, Far Away. And that's another great one. We're going to have a lot of fun discussing about the blue guy that comes up in that episode. So that's going to be a wonderful time. Don't miss out on that. So subscribe any place that you can find your podcasts. And until then, we'll be back very soon. May the Force be with you. Take care.